Back in action.
Back in action. Just thinking about managing these long-term problems. I don't know if you're like me, but it's just kind of like, well, I got injured, it'll heal, and I really won't have to deal with it again, kind of thing. I thought that way, especially when I had my first major injury when I was 14. When did you have what you would equate now to being a major injury?
My first major injury was either 4 or 5. Broke my elbow, jumping off a bed, trying to elbow smash one of my friends.
Oh, it's worth it, huh?
Yeah, but he moved.
But he moved. Classic wrestling move.
Right. I mean, I thought I had it all lined up and everything, and he moved. And my elbow met the floor, and the rest is history. So I was...
Is it your throwing elbow?
It's throwing elbow. So, and the funny thing is about like this whole idea that, you know, like once it heals, like you never have to deal with it again. It actually was something where like I never even thought about it, you know. But, you know, as I got older, obviously, like, I was a big baseball player and ended up pitching in college. But my first experience with my elbow actually hurting was in high school. Like, as my innings grew and I was throwing more.
Well, they didn't really track innings that much.
No, I mean, like, dude, like my senior year, I started every conference game we played. So there was weeks where I'd like, I would throw 2 complete 7-inning games in a week. Like,
wow.
Sometimes within 3 days of each other, right? And I remember like my junior year going through some like what was considered like dead arm, where my velocity dropped and my elbow was getting sore. And I remember going to the doc and then them sending me to PT. And them saying, hey, like, yeah, you're probably going to deal with this like the rest of your career because of you breaking your elbow when you were 4 or 5, right? Like there's probably some residual damage from that.
So we're talking about it back then.
So they were talking about it, but I never equated it that way. Like it was just kind of like, oh, okay. It was kind of like, if that's what I'm going to have to do, that's what I'll have to do. And, you know, like I never had any shoulder issues as a pitcher. But I did, you know, like have some elbow stuff. And then obviously like towards the end of my career, blowing my elbow out. But when you look at the amount of innings and the amount of pitches I threw between the time I was 11 to the time I was 22 when I graduated is exponentially higher than what kids are doing now. And I didn't technically blow my arm out until the end of my senior year. So it's just one of those things. Like, was I predisposed because of that? Maybe. Did I have more elbow soreness because of that? Maybe.
Right.
I can tell you back 25 years ago, like actually more than that, 30 years ago, like we weren't training like kids are training now.
Or doing nothing like they're doing now.
Right. My first real strength and conditioning program wasn't until I got to college. Now, lifted some weights here and there. There was no professional instructing us.
Of course you saw Rocky and had to emulate
Yeah,
Rocky.
like nobody was like...
Training montage.
There was no sports performance places where I grew up. Like if you were training with somebody, it was like you're training with the personal trainer at the YMCA that you know probably didn't know that much more than you did.
Nope.
Back then. So you know it wasn't until I really got into college where you had somebody that was actually guys like get after it. It was like that's way different than what I was used to doing in high school. So the training aspect just wasn't there. But what was there that isn't there really today is we just threw and we threw and we threw and we threw. So like the volume of throwing that we did was so high that when I go out and throw a 7-inning game, by that time it wasn't really that big a deal.
It was gradual too. It wasn't like you just did it and then you stopped doing it. I mean, how often did you play when you were a kid?
Oh, dude, like when I was 13 years old, the travel team that I played on, we played close to 80 games in the summer.
13, like you
13,
were 13 years old.
13 years old, like, and that was in Indiana where we're playing from May through August. And that's going to a tournament, and I'm probably throwing 3 of those games.
That's a lot of repetitions on that
because there's
sucker.
just there's no rules. You know, you throw a game, maybe get the day off, and then throw again, you know, the next day. And if it was a 4-day tournament, I was definitely throwing in at least 3 of those games.
Yeah.
Right? If it was a 3-day tournament, I was at least throwing in 2 of them. I wasn't the only one. We had other guys that were doing the same stuff. I didn't know any better because that's how we grew up. That's how we.
It
That's
doesn't
just
like
what we did.
injuries these days are reduced that much. You even look at the numbers for youth athlete injuries. I think it's slightly higher in some cases, in some incidents, and lower in others. So it's like when I hear people talk about injury prevention, first of all, I don't even really understand what that term is, how I would be using my body, and the chances of one part having more wear. Does it have more wear, or would it be actually built up from what I've done, right? Is it more resilient because of what I've done, and or has something been traumatized? Like, so it can be managed.
And I think from a baseball perspective, and this I can only say this because I work with a lot of baseball guys and I coached baseball the last 5 years. Like, if you're a strength coach or if you're like a baseball player's therapist, right, who's in charge of their overall like injury prevention,
Should they call them throwing therapists?
they could. You don't really have that much control. To think that they're going to come in a couple days a week and you're going to assess them and you're going to keep their body healthy, if you don't have control over their throwing, you're not preventing anything.
Oh, how much volume that is.
Because all they have to do is go to the wrong person that doesn't look out for any of that stuff, and you don't control it. So they can leave here completely fine and go to whoever and shred their arm easily within a matter of days, right? Like, we had a couple kids this offseason that I didn't control any of their throwing stuff, that their ramp up, because they had their guy, like their ramp up was too aggressive and they ended up with shoulder stuff. There's nothing I can do about that.
No.
You know, like outside of trying to educate them,
Right.
and outside of like, hey, here's the best we can do with what you're allowing me to do and the role you're allowing me to play.
I have a client who's not a baseball player. She, was an avid athlete, a lot younger, and she's like, well, my knee's bugging me again. I went to this spin class. The spin class was only 20 minutes. I'm like, well, what kind of watts did you pump out? Like, what was your resistance? She's like, well, it's just one of those bikes you crank down and we just go for it. And I'm like, okay, well, we never went through a submax heart screen and we never saw like how you responded to bike. Well, let's go do it. 10-minute, couldn't last 10 minutes on the bike, going at 200 watts, heart rate already at 170. Like 170. It's like that was her 80% threshold. Like her max heart rate was, predicted heart rate was like 190 something, because she's so young, right? And she's like, oh wow, do you think that me not being able to handle some of these things and the forces would contribute to how I feel? I'm like, yeah. I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense. Wouldn't it be nice to know that all the things that add up to someone not being okay are thought about in some way, and you can maybe even control some of these ideas of how you feel better rather than injury prevention? It's like, well, what about just progressing? It's like, what about just managing and progressing? So as you see the numbers and your subjectivity get better, it's like, well, maybe this activity would matter. How would I qualify it and quantify it in a way where if I need to eventually throw X amount of repetitions off the mound, that I knew that I could handle the volume and the intensity. I mean, same with the bike, getting on a bike. How would I know that I handle the volume and intensity when I'm just going on autopilot and I'm just following along with the class?
Right.
Like that makes no sense to me now. So that's such a great parallel into how majority of people are like, well, they come in here and it's like, yes, these things are going to matter. What are you paying attention to, in order to then know what may be affecting you outside of the walls? When we see someone for like maybe an hour, but there's 168 hours in a week, well, what does the rest of the volume and intensity look like? That could be affecting how somebody feels. Like, I think that's so much more valuable.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. And that was a great segue with throwing.
Yeah, and I mean, the hard part is it's like it's not easy. Like I don't want to sit here and like make it sound like, oh, it's easy to account for all these things. Like it's really not.
It's challenging.
It's a challenge because every human system is different, and like we're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that don't get enough sleep, that don't eat the best. That
Wait, Americans not eating the best?
Right. That there's other factors that do come into play with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I also don't tout myself as like this expert in injury prevention. Like it's like, no, like we can help facilitate you, you know, putting your body in a place to be able to recover better from things, right?
Yeah.
But I can't guarantee you won't get hurt. Like,
Well, it's like the overarching umbrella of what we term as performance, or what other people would think of as fit. I think fitness and performance are interchanged. I think of fit to do something. Fit, the fitness, are you a good fit to do that thing? Which would evidently like lead towards, well, how well do you perform doing that? And is your body a good fit to recover from that thing, perform at that thing, excel at that thing, or at least be tolerant of that activity? And that's what's interesting is that how somebody likes or dislikes something and tells somebody else, like my body doesn't like that. Usually it's like a ache or a pain or a tightness. It's like, well, this is how my body always is. Like, like you're going to know that. Like, how did anybody know exactly how you're feeling unless you're like grimacing and wincing in pain, or you're somehow moving a certain way where you're like, and then you ask, are you doing that?
well, and I think sometimes that's even deceptive, right? Like, you know, and again, I just go back to the last 5 years, like coaching and working with, you know, on average we had 16 pitchers every year. So taking data on all that stuff, we measured motion, we measured strength, we measured all this stuff. You know, you can take a guy that will tell you flat out they feel great. Coach, I feel great today. Like,
They may just
you
want
know,
to throw too, though.
I can't wait for my bullpen later today. And then you look at their numbers, and their numbers are showing a different story.
Feeling real.
Right? That whole idea, right? But then I've also had guys that tell me that they don't feel the best, right? But their numbers look good. But
Roger
now-
Federer throwing up on the court and winning a grand slam.
Right. But I never really had a way to judge that outside of velocity. If somebody's velocity was down 2 or 3 miles an hour, you know, you could go up to that guy and be like, hey, like what's going on? Like something off, right? And sometimes they'll be honest, sometimes they won't, because if it means they're coming out, they're probably not going to tell you the truth. Like I can say that because I used to do that all the time, right? Like there was never a single time in my life that a coach ever came out and said, are you okay? Do you need me to relieve you? No. Like
I want to be here. I want to be in.
My arm, like when I actually did hurt my arm, and supposedly that's when it went, like I couldn't throw the ball 55 feet.
Well, that's why sports have nothing to do with health.
But I'm just saying, like, I didn't want to come out then.
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to figure out a way
It's about
to stay
winning.
in the game then.
It's about winning and competing. It's not
like-
about like, hey, what are my blood markers?
Yeah,
like?
so like for me to ask an athlete, like, how do you feel? Like, what do you honestly think you're going to get a truthful answer?
Yeah.
Like you're not. So like, and there's plenty of times, and you can ask any athlete on the planet, right? Baseball, like basketball, football, doesn't matter. If you can use numbers to equate performance, right? Like so baseball with throwing velocity. There are times that as a baseball player, I felt like crap. And I felt like I was not where I needed to be, and I'd go out and have the best game that I'd had in a while. And then there was other days where you go out feeling great and your velo's down for whatever reason,
That's velocity.
and you like just don't perform. Your perception of where you're at just isn't always on par with where your body is. So to be able to segment and have numbers to be able to give you a better indication where your athletes are, I think is a great tool. And we utilize that for 5 years. And in doing that, we didn't really have any injuries, right? Like, so now I'm not taking your word for it anymore. I'm just relying on the numbers. Like, if the numbers don't look good, you ain't throwing. If the numbers look really good, you're throwing, right? Like, so we use those things to really judge, like, who was ready to go, who wasn't recovering fast enough. What are some things that we can do to intervene to see if we can speed that process up? And then remeasure, because if we would intervene, then we could remeasure and say, hey, did our intervention actually like create the result we're looking for, or did it not? Versus, hey, now that I did this thing to you, do you feel better? Right? Like, that's great that you do, but if the numbers still suck,
If
like,
they suck, they suck.
I'm not happy with it.
To support the show, like and subscribe and follow. If you would like to work with any of the Body Activation staff, go to body-activation.com. Want to learn more about the Muscle System Specialists, go to exerciseproed.com. Thank you again for watching and listening.